Throughout my journey of learning about every international American football league I can find, I've been introduced to some really cool leagues, such as the LFA in Mexico and the X League in Japan. While looking up videos about Japan's football league, the X League, I came across a video series the X League produced, where former X League player BJ Beatty sits down with various X League players and interviews them about their life and about playing football in Japan. The show's called Playing for Sushi, and Beatty states that he named the show that because of a book he read that convinced him to play overseas and gave him a new love for football. The book was called Playing for Pizza by John Grisham. It's a book about a third-string quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, Rick Dockery, who gets in the AFC Championship game after their first two QBs get injured. Dockery throws 3 interceptions in 11 minutes and is carried off the field on a stretcher. He gets told that he's cut from the team while in the hospital, and his agent eventually tells him that no team wants to sign him. He eventually gets an offer to play for a team called the Parma Panthers, an Italian football team. Throughout the book, you get to learn a little bit about parts of Italy, and Rick Dockery learns that these Italian football players have a passion for the game that he hasn't seen since he played high school ball, and he falls in love with football all over again. All in all, the book is okay. It felt like I was reading a Hallmark movie. It was pretty cheesy at times. But regardless, it was an interesting book if you're interested in learning about international football. And the way Grisham describes food in Italy will leave you begging for some Parmesan and espresso. The book did get me interested in the Italian Football League though, and the team that Rick Dockery played for, the Parma Panthers. They're actually a real team, and they currently play in the Italian Football League. So grab some espresso or hop on a Vespa as we take a look at football in Italy.
Però è intercettato l'intercetto da parte di Gradelli che 4, questa volta è un lancio per la Bella che con una ricezione incredibile raddoppia il vantaggio dei Guelfi. Questo paga e va Salom personalmente a segnare con un bellissimo
This is Gridiron History with Kyle, and you're watching Football in Italy. Before I get started, I wanted to share 2 more books I read while doing research on this topic. The first is one I've used multiple times now, called Touchdown, an American Obsession. This is basically a textbook about everywhere that plays American football, and it gives a high-level history about how a lot of these countries were introduced to football, such as Japan, Mexico, China, and even today's topic, Italy. This led me to another book with a similar title called Touchdown in Europe by Massimo Foglio. This book gives you a more in-depth look on how football spread to many European countries, such as Germany, Italy, and the UK. Now, football was introduced to Italy because of 3 main driving factors. 1. Just like how football has been introduced in most other countries, the US military brought football with them after their occupation of Italy during World War II. 2. A journalist and TV producer in Italy by the name of Bruno Beneck saw an opportunity to make money off of American football in Italy and decided to create a league. 3. A grassroots movement from a high school student named Alberto Marcucci, who learned about football and started his own team. Now, touch football was prevalent on practically every military base for the US during World War II. On November 23, 1944, 2 teams were formed to play a game of touch football in front of a crowd of Italians as a way to introduce them to the game. The game was played at Stadio della Vittoria, or Victory Stadium, and reports show that there were about 5,000 fans in attendance. This game ended up being called the Bambino Bowl. Another game was played a few weeks later, but this time it was a tackle football game between the Mutters of the 5th Army and the Bridge Busters of the 12th Air Force. The game was played on January 1st, 1945 at the Municipal Stadium in Firenze and was called the Spaghetti Bowl. Life magazine actually wrote an article about the game, providing us with a lot of insight into the event. Apparently, there were around 25,000 fans in attendance for this game. The 5th Army won the game 20-0, led by Corporal John Moody, an All-American who played at Morris Brown College, a historically black college. Moody scored 2 touchdowns during the game, and he wasn't playing against a bunch of scrubs. Most of the United States' best college football players were in the military at the time. So, both teams had a lot of Division I athletes on it. Moody would go on to play professionally after the war in the Canadian Football League. Throughout the 50s and 60s, most football games in Europe were played within the confines of US military bases. In the book Touchdown in Europe, the author states that high schools on the US military bases had high school tackle football leagues. Doug Erner, a US Army officer on one of the bases in Vicenza, Italy, helped set up an annual football game on his base after the high school season was over. This game was played annually for several years, and in 1972, they were challenged by a team from another base at Camp Darby, located between Livorno and Pisa. They agreed to start their own annual game, alternating sites. Over the next couple years, a few more teams joined in on the action. The teams borrowed equipment and uniforms from their high school teams in order to play. Erner was able to eventually lobby for an athletic budget increase so that all the teams participating could get their own equipment and uniforms. He decided to break away from being a military-based team and started his own football league around 1976 and 1977, after receiving a lot of interest from his peers wanting to join one of the teams. Erner's league was called the Northern Italian Football League, or the NIFL. There were 5 teams in the league: the Vicenza Blue Knights, the Vicenza Geronimos, the Camp Darby Rangers, the Aviano Eagles, and the Aviano Red Machine. While all of this was going on, there was a man by the name of Bruno Beneck trying his best to start his own football league in Italy. Bruno Beneck was a sports journalist and a TV producer for Italy's RAI network. He's credited as being one of the main people to bring baseball to Italy. It was essentially the commissioner of Italy's baseball league. During a business trip in the US, Beneck met Andy Robustelli, GM of the New York Giants in the NFL. Beneck saw potential to bring football over to Italy and pitched the idea to important sports investors in Italy. He was initially going to call his league Federazione Italiana Football, the FIF, but he didn't want it to be confused with soccer, which I think at the time had the same acronym. So he changed it to a totally different name that wouldn't be confused with soccer at all: Federazione Italiana Football Americano, which stood for FIFA. So yeah. He tried to get accreditation from the Italian Olympic Committee because they had control over most of the major stadiums in Italy. The Rugby Federation successfully fought against this though, stating that it would take away from building their sport in Italy. He also tried to make it part of the Baseball Federation that he helped create, but that also failed. Eventually, a guy named Bob Catt gave Beneck a call, stating that he was working on creating a football league in Europe called the Intercontinental Football League, or the IFL. Beneck was very interested and ended up paying $37,000 in 1973 to buy a team in the league, which he named the Rome Gladiators. $37,000 in 1973, adjusted for inflation, equals around $271,000 today. Cap attempted to work with the NFL to help set up the league, trying to create sort of a minor league for players cut from NFL rosters. Cap was convinced that he could get football to be popular in Europe. One reason mentioned in Touchdown in Europe that I found interesting was that in the 70s, only something like 1% of women in Europe watched soccer. In the US, 35 to 45% of women watched American football. He thought if you could get women into the game, then the entire family would be interested. The league was set to start in 1974, but kept getting postponed. It was eventually shut down. Around this time, inflation in the US was pretty bad, and the economy wasn't great in Europe as well. Also, geopolitical factors in Italy specifically made teams hesitant to participate. Bob Catt had helped organize 2 college teams around this time to tour in Europe and play each other in 1976. There were 2 NAIA schools, Texas A&I and Henderson State.
The Intercontinental Football League presents the NAIA champion team from Texas A&I taking on the runners-up Henderson State College in the first game European Cup Series.
They were scheduled to play 6 games versus each other in Europe, traveling to West Berlin, Vienna, Florence, Rome, Genoa, and Paris. They played their first 2 games in West Berlin and Vienna, and they were very successful, promoting a lot of interest in football. They were supposed to play in Italy next, but then something kind of crazy happened. During this time, there was a lot of political turmoil in Italy, and to the average American tourist, it was pretty unexpected. To keep a large situation that I don't fully understand short, there was some kind of political change that took place during this time, leading to political protests, which led to acts of violence, where Genoa's state prosecutor was assassinated in the middle of this college football tour. Cap was able to reschedule games to be played on military bases in Germany at Mannheim and Nuremberg. There was also some sort of payment issue between the IFL and one of the hotel and bus companies in Nuremberg, which left the Henderson State team stranded in Germany. The army base there ended up housing them, but all this chaos left a bad taste with the NAIA, and they didn't continue the series in future seasons. This, along with the economic issues I stated earlier, led to the IFL eventually getting cancelled. But that didn't mean that Beneck gave up on his dream of starting a team in Italy. Now, let's look at the third and final event that brought football to Italy. During a vacation in 1973 in the town of Tirrenia, near Pisa and Camp Darby, a high school rugby player by the name of Alberto Marcucci befriended another high schooler who was an American who attended Livorno American High School, located at Camp Darby, and played on their football team. Marcucci was invited to train with the football team that summer and learn the basics of football. During his next vacation in 1974, he returned to Tirrenia and again trained with the team. Once he returned home, he got with one of his buddies, Carlo Pini, and together they created their own team. They incorporated their club in January of 1975 and originally named the team Polisportiva Sambri del Oratorio di Santa Brigida di Piacenza. Yeah, they obviously ended up changing that name to Pantera Rosa, or the Pink Panthers. This is because of the Italian film The Pink Panther was coming out that summer. One of their first players, Enrico Vecchia, would later recall about their origin, that their first headgear was basically a motorcycle helmet with some homemade adjustments with iron straps bolted on. They wore homemade shoulder pads, used pieces of synthetic rubber for thigh pads, and wore padded ski pants for added protection. They practiced for an entire year, trying to build a team without playing an actual opponent. As the military's NIFL league was getting underway, Marcucci saw them as a chance to join and play real games. Marcucci got in touch with the Camp Darby team, asking if they could join the league. Doug Erner told him no, saying that they weren't ready to join a league as a brand new team, with no experience. The teams in their league had been established and had years of experience. Erner did let them schedule exhibition games though, so that they could play somebody. On October 16, 1976, the Panthers played Camp Darby. They borrowed helmets and pads from the high school team there, and the Piacenza Rugby Club lent them shirts to use as jerseys. Camp Darby beat them 64-12. Slowly and surely though, they started to get better and better. There was even a movie in the 70s called They Called Him Bulldozer, or I've also heard it called Uppercut. In the movie, Bud Spencer takes a challenge to organize some Italian athletes into a competitive American football team. They even casted some of the players from the Pink Panthers team for the movie. With good press and an increase in popularity in the game of football, the Pink Panthers gained sponsorship from a local hotel company. With that, they had to move the team to Milano and change their name to the Milano Rhinos. Soon, other teams were formed with only Italian players, such as the Frogs Gallerate. On June 25, 1978, the Milano Rhinos played the Frogs Gallerate, marking the first tackle football game played between two Italian football teams. The Rhinos won the game 34-0. Starting in 1978, the Rhinos were admitted into the NIFL. They lost every game that first season, and they technically won one game, I guess, off a forfeit, when one military team couldn't make it to the game. By 1981, there were enough Italian teams where they could make their own league, and they called it the Italian American Football Association, abbreviated to AIFA. Rhinos Milano at this point played in both the NIFL and the AIFA. Going back to 1978, a few students in Italy wrote to Bruno Beneck stating that they wanted to organize a team in Rome. Beneck still had the rights to the Rome Gladiators. Beneck and one of the interested students, Marcello Lo Principe, were able to get a lot of interest from locals in regards to creating a team. Enough interest that they could actually make 4 different teams. On December 27, 1979, they founded the 4-team Liga Italiana Football, or the LIF. One of the Gladiators players, Gianfranco Calistri, was nephew to the mayor of the village of Castel Giorgio outside of Rome. He and Beneck secured funding from the NFL to build an actual football stadium in Italy. They did this by telling the NFL that the village of Castel Giorgio was the ancestral home of Vince Lombardi. This wasn't true at all. Lombardi's grandparents were from Italy, but they were from Salerno, which is about 250 miles away from Castel Giorgio. This was 1980. So, it was probably harder to fact check this. They were able to get assistance in the end though, and they got a small stadium built in Castel Giorgio, and it was named Stadio Vince Lombardi. So, at this point, in the late 70s, early 80s, there are literally 3 leagues in Italy for American football. The most experienced league was the NIFL, with the military-based teams. The one with the best Italian players was the AIFA, with the Rhinos Milano. The one with the best promoter though was the LIF with Bruno Beneck. As soon as Beneck made his league, he got in contact with representatives from Germany to establish national teams in Europe that would represent the country they were in. Beneck created a national team for Italy, with most of the players coming from his LIF league. Italy played a German team on June 14, 1981, at the Stadio Vince Lombardi, with Germany winning the game 12-0. They were scheduled to play Germany again that next Wednesday at 9 p.m. The German team was late, and Italy didn't know where they were. They eventually showed up at 10 p.m., but everyone had left except for a couple players from the rival IFA league that had come to watch the game. They were able to speak to the representatives from the German team and convince them to only play the IFA-led Italian national team that they were going to create, rather than the LIF Italian team that Beneck had put together. So, even though Beneck had set up most of this and financed the games, the German team decided that they would only play the IFA team. This, alongside with some other operational issues from Beneck, had essentially killed the LIF league with the Rome Gladiators. Players were upset with Beneck and left the league to join the IFA for the 1982 season. The IFA and the NIFL eventually merged together in 1983. The league had changed names several times, and today it's called the Italian Football League, or the IFL. Though Beneck's hard work didn't technically lead to his own league, it did significantly increase the popularity of football in Europe. His organization with Germany to create national teams did eventually lead to a European championship for American football. It was first played in 1983 and is now ran by the IFAF, the International Federation of American Football. There has been a total of 16 total championships, and Finland has won the most titles with 5. Today, the IFL, the Italian Football League, is the highest level of American football in Italy. The Italian Football League is split up into Divisions 1 and 2. There are currently 9 teams in Division 1 and 13 teams in Division 2. There is a 6-team playoff to determine the champion of the league. Their championship game is called the Italian Bowl. Teams in Division 2 are promoted to Division 1 after winning their championship, replacing the worst team from Division 1 from that season. The Italian Football League plays their league from March to June. I believe, according to one article that I read, that teams can have up to 2 foreign players. And like Japan's league, only the foreign players get paid, and it's typically a small salary. The Italian Football League is run by the Federazione Italiana di American Football, or the FIDAF. It's a federation established to help promote American football throughout Italy. There are many different leagues under the FIDAP for both tackle and flag football, with both senior and junior level leagues, and for both men and women. Like I said earlier, Italy is part of the International Federation of American Football, or the FIAF. They are the governing body of international American football globally. The first IFAF World Championship was actually hosted by Italy in 1999, but they have never won the event. The IFAF World Championship is played every 4 years, but the last tournament was held in 2015. The 2019 championship was postponed, and the next one isn't scheduled until 2025. The IFAF also has the European Championship of American Football that we mentioned earlier, and Italy has won that 3 times, with their last time being in 2021. The European League of Football, or the ELF, is a football league in Europe that's probably a lot bigger than the Italian Football League, and it includes teams from multiple countries. There's an Italian team that used to be in the IFL, but is now in the ELF, called the Milano Seamen. I want to end this video by showing some of the ways you can watch Italian football. You can watch full games directly on the FIDAF YouTube channel. They'll show basically every game from the IFL season. The best place to get almost all your news about international football is at AmericanInternationalFootball.com, or AFI. They do deep dives into basically every well-established international football league, even the Italian Football League. A cool content creator I found, Silas Nasita. He's a vlogger on YouTube who's been putting out content of him playing football internationally for the past few years. He played college ball at Baylor and has traveled the world playing in places like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. If you want to see what playing football in different countries is like, definitely check out his channel. There's a cool documentary out there about football in Italy made by the channel called The Podium. The videos were made quite a while ago, but they also show what it's like playing in the IFL. Italian football has a really cool history that shows the passion that many Europeans have for American football. These guys want to be out here to help grow this great game throughout the world. I'll be excited to see how football in Italy continues to grow in the future. Thank you for watching Gridiron History with Kyle. If you like what you see, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as I'll be making more videos like this in the future.